Barrett. I'm on the City Council. I chair the Planning and Development Committee. And Danny and I were talking probably well before COVID started last year about having a class for the citizens and just to talk about planning and development, just soup to nuts, if you will, just A to Z. So thank y'all all for coming out tonight. And Tim's going to have a little class here. It's going to be good, interesting. I know I'm probably going to learn a lot more about our planning and development department. But before I do that, let me introduce some of our other council members that are with us tonight. Linda Dodd, who is also vice mayor. Danny Ford, councilman. Who else do we have? Skip, the mayor's here, Mayor Ray. And Skip Blau, chair of our LDA, Development Authority. And Josh, back here in the corner. Say hi, he's our code enforcement officer. Danny Roberts, our city manager. And of course, we all know Tim Prater. All right, so with that being said, I'll turn this over to Danny, who wants to talk just for a couple minutes, and we'll get Tim going. So, and again, y'all, thank you so much for coming out and supporting.
Oh, I'm sorry. Gave my last agenda out. I got it one. Thank you, Deb. So thank you, Councilman Newberry. So welcome everyone. Like Lisa said, we've been planning this for some time. We've had a lot of issues with code enforcement, planning, zoning that kind of spearheaded this class. So as you know, I'm Danny. I'm the city manager. I'm gonna give you just a few things. I'm gonna talk briefly, and Tim's gonna really get into the nuts and bolts of planning and development, planning and zoning, you may refer to it as. There's just a few things. We'll have questions at the end. We have 30 minutes right now of questions. It's going to take Tim, there's 96 slides to go through, so there's plenty of space at the bottom of your pages for each slide. Each slide up here is in your packet. You can write your notes, then we'll come up and talk, because this also is being televised on YouTube, so people are listening, and they have a real time hearing if you don't speak into the microphone. So we ask you to get up and just state your question, and we'll answer it the best way we can. So a few things that we're not going to do. We're not talking about the past. We're talking about how planning and zoning works. We're not asking any other questions about any other departments. We're here tonight to talk about planning and zoning. So if you have some other questions, I'll stay here as long as I can tonight and answer those other questions. But tonight, try to just keep your questions to this class. And if you have any other questions, write them down. You can email me. My email's on the website. All of our contact information is on the city's website. If you don't know it, let me know, and I'll give you the address to that. So, any questions? Here we go. So I'm gonna go quick because Tim's got a lot of stuff to cover. Tim speaks a little bit slower to me, so I've told him he's got to speak quicker to get through this. Because he's put a lot of work into this. He's worked on this for about 2 weeks now, putting these slides together. This is probably one of the most complicated departments in the city, next to water. The 3 departments I deal with on an everyday basis is finance, code enforcement, and water. So it's very technical code enforcement. Is there step-by-step things we have to do legally? It's one of the most governed laws for the state of Georgia that we have to do certain things. So a lot of times we have to deal with our attorney on cases, but Tim will get into that tonight. There are going to be 4 categories he's going to jump into. Zoning. So the way it works, zoning, development, permits, and then code enforcement. And he'll get into each of those. So to start off, the way it works here in the city of Loganville is a lot of times developers, business owners, residents may come to me and say, hey, Danny, I want to do this on my property. How do I do it? That's the first step. Typically, that starts the whole process. They'll come to me and say, you know, I got this piece of land. I want to put a structure on it. So then I have to go to Tim. Tim, what's the law say? What's our ordinances say? Then I get Tim involved. So on the first step, they always come and talk to the mayor, the council members, the mayor. They typically don't start with Tim for some reason. They always call us. And then we start the process. It is a very in-depth, long process that Tim has to work on. There's 8 of the departments that have input on all these cases that we're going to talk about for planning, zoning, development, and permits, code enforcement as well. So when I meet with a developer, you know, he'll come and say, hey, I got this property. Can I get it zoned to, say, commercial? Well, Staff can't make that determination. Only the 6 council members can make that determination. So what I tell them is, all I can do is ask. And then when they vote, you'll have your answer. Because we don't know how they're going to vote. We do not ask how they're going to vote before the meeting. They have to stay neutral. When I say they, the council members, they have to stay neutral to the case until the night they hear it. Law states that. So they can't have any predetermined notion of a typical zoning because they got to be neutral, just like a judge cannot hear the facts until they're in court. Same thing with the city council. So that's why you always see attorneys present typical cases to the council. It's a very in-depth technical process for zoning. So like I say, I tell a developer, I say, well, all we can do is ask. But sometimes I can tell them no because we don't have that zoning. Hey, we want to build 50 apartments. Well, back then we didn't have an apartment zoning. What distance we had was RMA. And we'll talk about that. Pretty much is 8 units per acre. So if they want more, I can say, well, we don't have that zoning, so therefore you cannot ask for it. They may ask for another zoning that's inactive. So some of those questions I can answer. But if it's a zoning question and it's a zoning that they want to change, they have to go through a process. And that process takes typically 2 to 3 months. We have to advertise it, we have to do all the stuff, and then it comes to the council. The council is the final say-so. If we get sued, the judge cannot zone for us. The only people that can zone in the city of Loganville is the city of Loganville council members.
Sorry, I thought I took
That's $25.
You brought your cat with you?
It's the cat, yeah.
It was getting too soon.
I lost my train of thought now. Way to go. No, I'm just kidding. So, you know, on some of those cases, that's, what was I saying? You got me messed up with the cat now.
You're saying the judge.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. So if we get sued and it goes before the court, the only thing the court can do is tell the city to rehear the case. They cannot dictate zoning. Only the city council can dictate zoning inside their incorporated limits. It relies on the majority of the council. So that's why, again, attorneys present these cases because they're so hard to deny zoning, because you got to think of it as this. It's their property, just like it's yours. We shouldn't be able to tell what you can and can't do on your property as long as it meets the zoning. So we're still, you know, free country, so your property is your property. The only 2 people that can decide that is the buyer of the property and the seller of the property. And if we have the zoning, then we have to pretty much give it to them, unless there's a few things that we can't deny, and Tim will go into those. But they're very limited. I know a lot of things you hear on your neighbors or social media says, well, they should have done this. Well, you're here tonight to know why we can't do those things. Because it's not easy to tell what somebody can do with their property if they own it. That's between the property owner and the person that wants to buy it. And like I said, if we have the zoning, we have to pretty much grant it as long as it falls within the categories. So that's pretty much the quickness of my spill. And then if there's any questions, I'll answer those. But that's typically how it starts. And then if they wanted to move forth with a piece of property, then I get Tim involved and it goes to all the other departments, and then that process starts. So with that.
Thank y'all for coming. Have a good night. All right. So this is the most boring stuff you'll ever hear in your life. This is the cure for insomnia. Prager, I'm the Director of Planning and Development, and I want to thank everybody for showing up tonight. So planning and development basically has 3 jobs. We do zoning, permitting, and code enforcement. And we'll go in depth into all of them tonight. Zoning is the longest. Let me back up one. So there's 5 people in my department. There's me, I have an administrative assistant, I have a plan reviewer / building inspector, and I have a full-time building inspector and a full-time code enforcement officer. So zoning. We'll get into what is zoning. So zoning laws regulate the use of land within a municipality or a county. It controls the way in which the land can be developed and what the zoned land can serve. I'm not used to this clicker. Zoning is what keeps residential districts residential, commercial districts commercial, and industrial districts industrial. So zoning dictates what type of properties can coexist in a particular area within a municipality or a county. Some examples are, we have zonings that are strictly single family. That's all you can build in that zone. And we have mixed use or transitional zonings, which will have a combination of commercial and residential in the same district. And then we have on the other end of the spectrum, the industrial, which we try to keep away from any of the residential areas. So what does zoning mean? Zoning is the power of local governments to provide their prospective boundaries, the zoning and districts of property for various uses, and the prohibition of others or different uses within such zoning districts. Under the Constitution, it says the governing authority of each county and of each municipality may adopt plans and may exercise the power of zoning. This authorization shall not prohibit the General Assembly from enacting general laws establishing procedures for the exercise of such powers. So the state gives local governments the authority to do zoning. However, they keep the authority basically to change the laws that govern zoning. And we have to follow all the laws. So there's basically two different types of zoning actions. You have administrative and legislative. And under the city code, section 119-33, for administrative variances, it says, except for density and use variances, the city manager or designee shall have the power to grant administrative variance from the development standards of this chapter, where in his opinion, the intent of the chapter can be achieved and equal performance is obtained by granting a variance. The authority to grant such variances shall be limited to the following requirements. And it gives me, or gives Danny, 7 requirements. And they're minor requirements. For example, a front yard or yard adjacent to a public street, we can do an administrative variance of no more than 10 feet. If it's over 10 feet, it's considered a major variance. And it lays out 7, it's side yard, rear yard, building height cannot exceed 5 feet, distance between buildings. It's very limited, the power they give us to do an administrative variance. So anything beyond them 7 is a legislative decision. So what is a legislative decision? It's the adoption or amending of a zoning regulation, the approval of a variance or a special use, the changing of the official zoning map, which would include annexations and rezones. So zoning is a development tool comprised of 2 components. You have text and you have a map. The text sets the standards for the development, like setbacks, buffers, units per acre, and the map shows where these activities can take place at inside the city, or if you live in the county, inside the county, because each jurisdiction will have a zoning map. They gave me a timeline, so I'm trying to. So zoning tells us what type of development or business is allowed on a given piece of property. The cities and counties tend to group districts and neighborhoods according to their zoning map. So the zoning procedure law in Georgia governs the process for making zoning decisions. The law does not make zoning mandatory in the state, but if a community elects to adopt zoning regulations, then the procedures outlined in the law must be followed. And believe it or not, there are still cities in the state of Georgia that do not have zoning ordinances. There are states you don't have to have a business license. Cities you don't have to have a business license to open a business. But that's like rural South Georgia. But I have been to some of them communities before.
I'm gonna jump in and tell y'all real quick. So the county cannot tell the city of Loganville what to do in their city, just like the city of Loganville cannot tell the counties what to do. So we're independent of one another. So just also know that, but if you're in the corporate limits of the city of Loganville, doesn't matter if you're a government authority, like we have government authorities, we have two of them. We have Walton County Board of Commissioners and Walton County Board of Education. Those are governing bodies within the corporate limits of the city of Loganville, but we dictate what they can and cannot do. Even though they're a government just like us, they're in our corporate limits, so we can, by law, make them adhere to our rules, such as fire marshal, which they have, permits to, and plannings. So those, just want to make sure y'all clarify that the county cannot tell us what we can and cannot do. We're independent of the county and the state. State can tell us, if we ask for a new zoning, then that does have to go for state legislation. So if we wanted to create a new zoning within the city limits, that would have to go before the state for approval. So I want to clarify that.
So because the General Assembly gives the city zoning power, zoning laws can be changed by the local government as long as they fall under or within the state and federal statutes that we'll get into shortly. So the laws that govern zoning, so starting from the lowest and going to the highest. The zoning ordinance, chapter 119 of the City of Loganville's Code of Ordinances. And all of our codes can be found on municode.com. State laws, Georgia Constitution, Georgia Planning Act, Minimum Standards and Procedures for Comprehensive Planning, the Zoning Procedures Act, the Conflict of Interest in Zoning Act, the Annexation Procedures Law, the Supreme Court of the State of Georgia, and the Georgia Court of Appeals. Under federal law, all these have to adhere to the Public Hearing Act, which is OCGA 36-36-36. OCGA stands for Official Code of Georgia. Like I said, all them codes you can look up. If you go to the Georgia General Assembly's website, they have a section over there that says Georgia Codes. You click on it, it'll take you to LexisNexis. It's free. You can look up all the state codes under LexisNexis.
So if you go to our zoning or to our ordinances and Municode, you'll see a lot of times OCGA is referenced in the state law.
Right.
We cannot change state law, but we can be more restrictive than state law, but we cannot be less restrictive. And I'm going to give you a prime example. When we had sprinklers in all the buildings for commercial, state law says you didn't have to have sprinklers unless it was over a certain square foot. But in the city of Loganville, we said any commercial building would have sprinklers. The council at the time in 2005 enacted that. It was in the ordinance. So therefore, we can be more restrictive. We just can't be less restrictive than the state law. But you'll see the OCG a lot of times referenced in the ordinances. Y'all know what ordinances are? It's the law that they set that I'm in charge of following through them.
So under federal law, we have the U.S. Constitution. We have the Federal Circuit Court. We have the U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals. And we have the Supreme Court of the United States. So if you was to have a zoning issue that you believed was a violation of your federal rights, you would start at the Superior Court. Let's say you lived in Walton County. That's where you would file your case at. You could work your way all the way up to the Supreme Court of the United States. If they told you no, then you're just out of luck because there's nowhere else to go to higher than the Supreme Court of the United States.
And a lot of times we'll reference this. You've heard it in the past. Talk about setting rate for rentals versus owned, about how the city should be able to control that. Fair Housing Act, which is a federal law, says that no municipality or state government can enact how you dictate your property. Is it for rent or for sale? That's under a federal law.
Types of zoning. We have annexations, rezones, variances, and special uses. So what is an annexation? Annexation is basically the act of bringing property into the city limits. Why would you want to annex into the city? Well, the value of annexation is to choose a government that will provide you with the highest use for your property. So if you as a property owner wanted a denser use on your property, you could ask to annex into the city, and because we have sewer capacity, you could get more units per acre basically than you could in the county.
But the city cannot annex without your approval now. It's a state law, it's a new law, changed in the 90s. Before, cities could annex outside, but now the property owner has to ask to be annexed, and then we had to make sure it doesn't create
Yeah,
islands.
we'll get into that.
Okay, thank you.
So what are some of the rules for annexation? It must adhere to OCGA Title 36, Chapter 36. It must be approved by the county. So anytime we would get an annexation in, we have to send all that paperwork to the county. It goes before the Board of Commissioners. They vote to whether to allow that property to be annexed in or not. So they have two options, yes or no. If they say yes, we keep moving forward. If they say no, then the city has to make a decision. Do we want that property in the city or not? If we do, we have to contact DCA and go into arbitration with the county. And it's kind of like a court system DCA sets up, and we argue our case, county argues their case. There's rules of procedures. This is the book of annexation. It's 41 pages long. So this is the rules we have to go by to do arbitration with the county.
That's Department of Community Affairs.
Yes.
That's what DCA stands for.
So if DCA decides, no, you can't annex, county has a better point, then it stops. If they say, yes, you can, then we move forward. You can't create an island. So if you have two pieces of property and three sides of it are surrounded by the city, and that outer piece of property wants to annex in, it's not eligible because it'll make the piece of property beside it completely surrounded by the city and create an island in the county. The state says you can't create islands. The property must abut the municipal boundary by at least 1/8 of the total aggregate of the property, or at least by 50 feet, whichever's less. So if it's not going to create an island, the county says, yeah, you can do it. It meets all of OCGA Title 36 codes, and it touches the city by at least 50 feet, then it's eligible to be annexed into the city. So what is a rezone? A rezone is a legislative act that involves changing the use of a piece of property or a piece of land from its original zoning to another classification. Zoning remains with the property and not with the property owner. So no matter who you sell that piece of property to, the zoning remains the same. The only way it changes, somebody comes to the city council, asks for a rezone of the property, and it gets approved. So the classifications include residential, commercial, industrial, and then you get into more specific designations as you move on through the codes. So why would you want to rezone your property? Most people want to rezone their property for a different use that they don't currently have. For example, a property owner may want to have a residential area rezoned commercial to open a business. If y'all remember last week at the council meeting, we had a rezone on Conyers Road, been a residential house forever. They sold the house to a new buyer. He wants to make offices in it, so he asked for a rezone, and the rezone was granted. So rezone actions involve changing the zoning classification of the property generally from a less intense use to a more intense use, and that would be going from residential to commercial. What are some of the rezone standards? Will the zoning proposal permit a use that is suitable in view of use and development of adjacent or nearby properties? Will the zoning proposal adversely affect the existing use or usability of adjacent properties? Whether the property to be affected by the zoning proposal has a reasonable economical use as currently zoned. And these are questions we have to answer when we're presenting a zoning case to the Planning Commission or the City Council. Whether there are other existing or changing conditions affecting the use and development of the property which give supported grounds for either approval or disapproval of the zoning proposal.
We won't talk about rezoning because that's one of the biggest things that Tim and council deals with, and how hard it is to deny someone a rezone. Traffic cannot be used.
We'll get into that.
Okay. Is it going to be passed on this? Okay. Well, I looked at which variances, so.
We'll get into that.
What about best use? We want to talk about that later? Best use for your property? Why people want to rezone?
Yeah, I've already talked that. Where was you at?
Well, what I want to hit on this is property owners want to rezone for get the best use of their property. So if I have a property and I want to sell it, I want it commercial, right? Because it's more value. So who's the city council to deny me best use of my property that I paid for? That's why it's so extremely hard for them to sit up here and say, well, I don't think that's the best use for your property. So that's one of the biggest things that me and the city attorney go back and forth. And last week we talked about it with the storage center. That commercial property has been sitting for 17 years. If there was a commercial component that could have went in, it would have went in. If they would have denied them, that would have been a lawsuit in waiting.
We'll get into that.
Okay. So we have to see what is the best use for that property owner at the time. And that's why it's so hard for the council to sit up here and say, just deny it. Because we hear some of y'all say, Tommy Lee Fuller, deny it. We don't need those in a residential area. Well, guess what? Apartments is residential. So if I have 17 acres and I can put, say, 20 houses on it, or I can put 20 apartments on it, who do you think is going to pay more money? So if the city was to deny that, they would deny that property owner best use of their property, which we went in court and we would have lost. And then when the cycle would start all over again, coming back for the city council. So like I said, the judge can't tell us to rezone it, all they can tell us to rehear the case. But it takes a lot of money to get to that point. So it's so hard to deny rezoning.
As long as it meets all the qualifications, it's hard to deny it, yes. So variances, oh, wrong button. So what is a variance? A variance is a request to deviate from the current zoning requirements. It's not a change in the zoning, but it's a waiver from a specific requirement. So zoning variances are the exception and not the rule. This means that you can follow your due diligence, submit all your required documentation, and you still can be denied your variance. Variance is allowed for the approval of uses and structures that's prohibited because they do not meet the ordinance requirements, such as minimum backyard setbacks is one of them. The applicant must ordinarily show a hardship. So a hardship would be something is weird with the lot you own. It's got a weird topography, or the property lines are cut at a weird angle, and you just need that little bit to make it work. And that's what variances are for. And then you get into special use permits. So a special use relates to a use that is allowed in the specific zoning, provided that it meets conditions set out in the ordinance. For an example, we say on commercial you have to have a hardened surface. Two hardened surfaces it mentions are asphalt or concrete. We had a case was a couple of months ago. Actually, it was the mini golf course they're opening on Harrison Road. So he wanted to put down, it was crushed concrete and asphalt millings as his hardened surface, but it wasn't concrete or asphalt. So he had to ask for a special use permit to use that type of hardened surface, because hard surface is required, and he was going to have one. It just wasn't the asphalt or the concrete. So special uses versus variance. Applicant for a special use does not have to show a hardship, whereas a variance does. And in essence, a variance is a permission to break the law because it's not allowed in the ordinance to begin with. So here's a fun fact for nerds. In 1926, the Supreme Court ruled that properly drawn zoning ordinance were a valid exercise of the state's governing power. And then the states delegate that power to the local municipalities and counties. So our zoning ordinance, if you remember back on slide 9, zoning is a development tool that consists of text and a map. The zoning ordinance is the text for that tool, and Chapter 119 of the City Code is the city zoning ordinance. The ordinance details what's allowed in a specific zoning. It regulates the use like lot size, building placement, density, and building height. So the key takeaways of this is the zoning ordinance is a rule that defines how the property, the specific geographic zones can be used. It regulates the purpose and the special use of the property, like density, lot size, height, structure. And zoning rules generally keep residential away from commercial property. So what is the importance for homeowners to know their local zoning laws? Melanie.
Yes, sir.
She was asleep.
$20, Melanie.
So zoning laws can affect what you're allowed to do on your property. If you want to do something like run a business out of your garage, you should call to make sure that's allowed. If you want to do an addition to your building, you should maybe look at the zoning ordinance to see if you're allowed to add on to your house or have an accessory structure, or how close that accessory structure has to be from the property lines. That's all the things that are in the zoning ordinance. So the zoning ordinance breaks zoning down into 3 categories. We have residential, commercial, and industrial. Within the 3 categories is further broken down into subcategories. So under residential, you have R44, this is in our ordinance, which stands for residential 44,000 square feet. So an acre is 43,560 square feet. So when they adopted this, I guess they just decided to round up, make it even 44,000. Under R22, that stands for residential 22,000 square feet. We have R16, 16,000 square feet. Then we get into our multifamily, RM4, that's residential multifamily, 4 units per acre. Then we have RM6, same way. RM8, 8 units per acre. So back in, it was like 2005, the city inactivated R16. We still have that zoning in the city. We still have regulations in the zoning ordinance that governs how that property is to be used, but we don't rezone anything to R16 now. A few months back, City Council decided to do the same thing with RM8. We still have the zoning. We still have the guidelines in the ordinance that tells what you can do under that zoning, but we will not be rezoning anything else to RM8 unless the city council changes that. And then we have manufactured home parks. Under residential/commercial districts, we have one, that's a planned urban village. So a planned urban village consists of a combination of commercial and residential in one development. It has to be a minimum of 10 acres. It can't be over 100 acres. And it uses what's called a FAR, which is a floor area ratio. And that's residential versus commercial versus the size of the property. So under non-residential, it's 0.4. So 0.4% of that property can be commercial. For residential, it's 0.2. So only 0.2% of that property can be residential. So it's about half and half between, or commercial's 50% more than what you can build under residential. Under commercial districts, we have CBD, and that does not stand for cannabinoids. That's commercial, it's a central business district. We have commercial neighborhood, O&I, office and institutional, which is more of the office space zoning, like if it was a lawyer's office or an accountant, it's that type of zoning. And then we have commercial highway, which is usually on our main thoroughfares, which is retail, restaurants. Under industrial, we have two, light industrial and heavy industrial. And that would be where your manufacturing would be at. And we try to keep that zoning away from the residential areas. Then we get into overlay districts. An overlay district applies to an additional layer of standards to all the areas within the defined overlay boundary, regardless of the underlying zoning. It supplements or supersedes existing regulations within the underlying base zoning district. The city of Loganville has two open space subdivision Main Street overlay. Under the open space subdivision, our densest residential zoning for single family is R22, which is 22,000 square foot lots. With the open space subdivision, you can get 16,000 square foot lots instead of the 22,000. But in order to get that 16,000, you have to give 25% of your property as green space. So 25% of that subdivision would have to be green space in order for them to get to 16,000 square foot lots. Under the Main Street overlay, it is a residential/commercial zoning, and it uses a FAR just like the PUV does. And if I'm not mistaken, it's the same ratio, 0.4 to 0.2 for commercial and residential. So in addition to the districts, the zoning ordinance provides for the planning commission, variances, and other restrictions. The restrictions can be specific or general restrictions across all the zonings. So for instance, in the CH zoning, the front facade of buildings has to be wood, concrete, brick, stone, stucco, or glass, and it has to extend 20 foot down each side of the building. So that's a specific requirement in the CH zoning. Tall weeds and grass is general across all zonings. It don't matter what zoning you're in. The Planning Commission. Planning Commission consists of 7 members approved by the City Council at large, which means no individual council member gets an appointment. The council as a whole votes on each member of the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission cannot make a legislative decision. They can only make a recommendation to the City Council. Our current members are Janice Tribble, she's the chairman. Barbara Forrester, she's vice chair. Amanda Sosby, Alma Thomas, Richard Hommick, Catherine Self, and our newest member, where's she at? She's sitting back there in the back, Lisa Luttrell. She just got appointed Thursday. So during my research, the first reference I can find for a zoning ordinance in the city of Loganville was 53 years ago in 1968. I found some minutes where they adopted one. Couldn't find anything before that. That's the map they adopted with it. So it's my understanding when the city of Loganville was created, they pulled a mile out from the city well and drew a circle. And since that time, we've been adding to that circle. So if you look on the right side of the map, you can see a little bit that's outside the circle. 1987, it gets a little more spread out. New technology with the map there.
So we were chartered twice. So the first charter was a half-mile from the center of the town well, and then in 1905, it went to a mile. So that's why there was reference to charters in state legislation. Just a little fun fact there for you.
We love them fun facts. So in 2005, you can still see where some of the circle was. Not a whole lot. This is our current zoning map. I think there's like one spot left that has the little arc in it. Now we get to the fun stuff. Court cases. So this was a case from the Supreme Court of Georgia in 1975. It's Barrett versus Hamby. So the estate of Mike C. Hamby applied for rezoning from R20 to a planned shopping center. The public hearing was held before the Cobb County Board of Commissioners. The application was denied. The executor of the estate filed a complaint in Cobb Superior Court, alleging that the R20 classification deprived him of his property under Article 1, Section 2, Paragraph 3 of the Georgia Constitution and the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment of the United States.
It goes back to what I was saying, we did not right best use of his property.
So following evidentiary hearing, the court agreed with the executor and the R20 designation was unconstitutional as to the Hamby property and ordered the board to reclassify the property consistent with the owner's constitutional right. So the court couldn't tell them, you have to rezone this property to commercial. They just told them they had to reclassify the property to fit the zoning for that area, which Danny was saying, you know, the court can't instigate a zoning, they can only tell us to rehear the case. So the taking clause of the Fifth Amendment, which is made applicable to the states through the 14th Amendment, provides the foundation for the regulatory taking doctrine. And we'll get into that a little bit later.
You want to talk about case law, how that becomes law later? Or?
Case law is law.
Right, I'm going to make sure they understand.
Yeah. So that goes back to all the laws that govern zoning, you know, Supreme Court cases, federal court cases, they all dictate how the law is to be applied. Here's another case of Georgia. Lindsey Creek Area Civics Association versus the City of Columbus. So the Lindsey Creek Civic Association, comprised of 492 residents of the Lindsey Creek, Boxwood, and Carriage Estates subdivision, sought declaratory and injunctive action relief against the consolidated government of Columbus, Georgia, from the rezoning of 42 acres of a 64-acre tract previously zoned residential to commercial and apartment office zoning. The neighbors claim that as a result of the zoning, they would be especially subject to increased traffic, flood danger, reduced home values, and general nuisances. They allege that the zoning was illegal, unconstitutional, and void under the charter, that as a result of the ordinance allowed the change and should be declared void. The trial court denied relief on the grounds that the neighbors suffered no special damage and therefore lacked standing. And the court said, such an inconvenience is a condition incident to urban living. It is merely the result of normal urban growth and development. To hold that such an inconvenience would give to any resident or property holder of an urban area the right to override the decision of boards of zoning appeals any time such property owner or 492 residents disagree with such decision would be a dangerous precedent to establish. It result in materially slowing, if not completely stopping, the inevitable and necessary growth of cities. So I know y'all have heard me tell the Planning Commission and the City Council many times, you cannot deny a rezone based on traffic alone. There has to be other circumstances. It can't just be because it's going to create traffic on Tommy Lee Fuller. This is the case law that sets that precedent. If we deny it based on traffic, we will get sued and we will lose under this case law. You have to have other circumstances. Traffic can be part of the equation, but it can't be the equation, if that makes sense. The constitutionality of actions taken under zoning laws are also scrutinized under the 1st, 5th, 14th Amendments of the U.S. Constitution, and similar section of the Georgia Constitution are also used to evaluate zoning decisions. The First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution grants the freedom of speech and of the press and of people to peacefully assemble. And today, many sign regulations are under scrutiny for First Amendment right violations. Back years ago, a lot of people used to put their sign ordinance in with their zoning ordinance. And if you had a First Amendment case because of a sign, you could have your whole zoning ordinance throughout. It's unconstitutional because the sign ordinance was part of your zoning ordinance. Back in, I think it was 2005, the city removed its sign ordinance from its zoning ordinance. Now you still can get First Amendment cases against your sign ordinance, but it won't negate your zoning ordinance. We can regulate signs based on size, location, time, but you can't regulate signs on verbiage. They have to be word neutral. It doesn't matter what the sign says. Is the sign itself legal or illegal? And we have one of the toughest sign ordinances in the state of Georgia. The Fifth Amendment establishes that no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without the due process of law. This is where the taking issue comes into play. The Fifth Amendment prohibits governments from obtaining land or property for public use without just compensation. The taking laws of the Constitution simply states, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. However, the clause has taken on a prominent role in the Constitution with respect to the limits of state and local regulations when it applies to zoning now. It's just not eminent domain, which this was addressing. Now it's, does our zoning ordinance reduce the value of your property to nothing? That's considered a taking now.
You hear a lot of people that present cases saying taking property, and that's what it's referring to. You're denying them best use of their property, so you're denying them the best money for their property, and that's where the taking clause comes from. So that's what that means.
So another fun fact, the history that led to the Fifth Amendment enactment. The taking clause found its beginning in Section 39 of the Magna Carta. Who knows what the Magna Carta is? Anybody? 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 The Magna Carta is the royal charter of rights agreed to by King John I of England in 1215. And it declared that land would not be taken without some form of due process. No freeman shall be taken or imprisoned or exiled or in any way destroyed, nor will we go upon him nor send upon him except by lawful judgment of his peers or by the law of the land. And that's where we get the Fifth Amendment from. Sometimes in zoning action may be perceived as an inverse condemnation when property is rendered valueless or unusable by the land development regulations or rezoning action. So the United States Supreme Court first recognized in 1922 that if regulation goes too far, it will be recognized as a taking. A regulatory taking occurs when a government regulation limits the use of private property to such a degree that it effectively deprives the property owner of any value. The 14th Amendment asserts that states cannot condense or lessen the privilege of the citizens of the United States or deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, or deny any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of law. So the taking clause of the Fifth Amendment is applicable to the states through the 14th Amendment. In this case, all property owners, both the applicant and opponents, must be afforded due process in the zoning processes and proceedings. Further, similarly situated property must be treated equal. If they're not, then you have a lawsuit. Now we're getting into permits. Does anybody need a break? Everybody good? Water, chips, bathroom? Danny got me on a timeline. He's watching me. He's watching me over here.
You got 37 more pages to go.
All right, so if the property is correctly zoned and you apply for a permit that fits within that zoning classification, it does not go before the Planning Commission or the City Council for legislative actions because it is a permitted use. And these are some of the codes we have to adhere to when we're dealing with permits or property. And there is a bunch of them. I'm not going to read all of them. It's in your book. That'll help you fall asleep tonight. So why do I need a building permit? It ensures the contractors are licensed for the work that's being done. It triggers the inspection process to make sure that the work that's being done meets minimum standards. So the permits are to protect the property owner and the tenant. So if you have an electrician come to your house and they run some new wire to your back porch or whatever, and your house burns down, first thing the insurance company is going to ask, did you have a permit? The second thing is, did your electrician have a license? If you say no to either one of them, they could deny your claim. So, you know, when we tell you, you got to get a permit to re-roof your house. Why do I need a permit to re-roof my house? It's already got a roof on it. They're just replacing it. There's codes that they have to adhere to when they re-roof your house. And if they don't adhere to them codes, it will void the warranty, and your insurance company could deny your claim. When do I need a permit? New construction, addition to structures, structural alterations of $50 value or greater, swimming pools, re-roof, storage buildings. Work by tradesmen, they have to have a state license. So that's your electricians, your plumber, HVAC, and any change of occupancy for commercial buildings. What does not need a permit? That's the better question. You don't have to have one do cosmetic work, painting. We don't care what kind of flooring you got in your house. Replacing fixtures, which would include wall outlets. If you just have to replace a wall outlet, you don't have to have a permit for that. If you're replacing your toilet, you don't have to have a permit for that. If they're adding new wiring, if they're running new wiring, if they're running new plumbing, if they're running new HVAC, you have to have a permit for that. But minor fixtures, toilet sinks, faucets, electrical outlets, light switches, you don't have to permit that. Development permits. The process is, after they talk to Danny, they submit plans to my department. This is a set of development plans. It's 64 pages. It has to adhere to all the codes you've seen a couple pages back. We send them plans out to 6 different departments for review. So we either get approvals back that they meet all the standards in our codes, or they get redlined. If the plans get redlined, we send the comments back to the developer. He has to change the plans, resubmit them. Sometimes we go through that process 3 or 4 times before they get them right, and we approve them. Once we approve them, we issue a permit. Once that permit is issued, that triggers the inspections. We go out and do inspections on everything they're putting in the ground to make sure they're doing it per their set of plans. Once everything's in, they submit a final plat. We give them a CO for the development. Under building permits, it's pretty much the same process. They submit building plans. This is a permit for a new house. It's 53 pages long. We have to review that, make sure it adheres to all the building codes, all their contractors have license, everything's up to par. And it's the same process. We give them approval. If they don't, we redline them, send them back. They have to resubmit. Once they get their permit, that triggers the inspections. On a new residential house, we do 18 inspections from the time they break ground to the time they get a CO. And we've issued, I don't know the exact number, but it's over 100.
For what, permits?
Permits this year.
So if we're getting code enforcement, I'm gonna talk about building. So I typically don't get involved in permits unless typically the architect,
I make them mad and they call him.
Yes. So we have 30 days from the time of building permits, they submit plans to Tim. We have 30 days by state law to review them and send them back. So that's, like I said, water department, sewer department, stormwater department. We have to send them our own call engineer, which is not a city employee, but we contract with Keckenwood. They look at the site plans, the drainage, everything, and they have to submit. When they do comments, then we have to send them back to their other engineer of the company that's doing this, or their engineer or their architect, depending on who does it. And then we have to go back and forth. This takes forever. A lot of times I get involved, they'll call me up, typically the developer, because it's a lot of money. Because, you know, time is money for them.
I made him mad.
Yep. I just can't get nowhere to him. He's had my plan for over 4 months now, and I just don't know what to do. I said, okay, so I'll look at it. Go talk to him. He goes, well, I got these on 3 days ago. Here's the email. Okay. Most builders like to stretch the truth a little bit. We do make mistakes. I'm not going to say we don't. We do. But we try to get our stuff done within 30 days. But the stormwater, the sewer, and the water, those people are also the people fixing the water repairs, the sewer repairs, and the stormwater repairs. So their foremans are the ones that review the plans. I'm gonna brag on Loganville a little bit because it's not like Gwinnett or Washington County have multiple people in the department that does nothing but review plans. They're working. You have a water main break, they're out there fixing it. They got to come back and review these plans, and they got to look at everything from hydrants, locations. I mean, Tim's giving you about 100,000 aerial view of what they actually do, but we could spend days talking about all the stuff that goes in a set of plans. Every page just has to be microscope looked at, because if we miss one thing in here and stamp it approved, it's set in stone. It's done.
And when we go to the developer and say, hey, this is not right, you got to fix this.
You stamped it, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
says it
So it's
right
on
here,
us.
you stamped it approved.
Right.
So,
A lot of times I also get to dealing with subdivisions that say, I have a flood in my yard and y'all need to come out and fix it. Well, for one, we don't go on private property. Well, it's a drainage. Well, it's not our drainage, it belongs to the homeowner. So we look at these, and these will tell us easements. It'll tell us the easements for water, sewer, and stormwater. The city's responsibility is only for city-owned streets. If it's in an apartment complex or a private community, we have a few. Those do not belong to us. So therefore, we will have easements. But if it's in a city road, we don't need easements because it's our road. So we go in. That's why you see water and sewer in the right-of-way of our roads, of the city roads. If they're on private roads, then we have to obtain easements from the developer before he gets his final plat. So, and also real quick, they had to put money up for the roads, the sidewalks, retention ponds, that stuff Tim does, and they had to put a pretty good penny up. What's phase 3 right now at Logan Point?
$1.2 million.
So he has to come up with $1.2 million of bond, either cash or surety bond, before we release it. Because we're not going to be holding the ticket when he walks out and we got to go pay the road.
So the way a bond works is that covers any repairs that need to be done to the infrastructure they've installed. We hold their bonds for up to 24 months. If something breaks, we call the developer and say, hey, you need to come fix this. If they say, nah, I'm out, then we will call in their bond and we'll have the money to go in and fix it.
Because the bond's in the city's name.
So
we hold their money.
After that time period of 18 to 24 months, if everything's good, then we release their bond and they get their money back.
That's where Natalie comes in the back. So she has opened a bank account for that separate bond for every development that requires a bond. And then like Tim said, if they're done and everything's signed off on, then we release that bond, they get their money back. We keep the interest. So that's just a little fun fact. It's so much that goes into this. That one person, Tim, does all for planning. Water does it. I mean, it's so much work that they do and they're responsible for. If they make one mistake, it can be detrimental to the city. And it's happened. We've had previous planning directors that let a bond go and didn't call it in, and the developer walked away, and then we had to go pave the street. Well, paving is very expensive when you pave a road. So they got their money back, and the developer walked away. And we had no legal authority to go after them because we signed off on it. So that can get you fired at Loganville if you let that happen. So.
We're not going to let that happen.
No.
Code enforcement. Have you ever heard anybody say they wanted to grow up to be a code enforcement officer? He did.
Josh is back there. It's Josh, y'all.
I did not do that. I did what I wanted to do.
So most people don't even know what code enforcement is until we show up, knock on your door, and say, "Hey, you got to do this."
20 minutes.
Yeah.
The most talked about right here is code enforcement.
Yeah.
Well, oh my God, I get
So what
5
do you
emails every day.
So what do you need to know about code enforcement? Well, that's a good question, and it depends on what jurisdiction you live in, because every jurisdiction has different codes. Our codes are different from if you live in the county. And code enforcement can fall under a variety of departments. They can be under fire marshal's office, planning and zoning, police department, public works department. It just depends on what jurisdiction you're in as to what department code enforcement will fall under. So generally speaking, a code enforcement is responsible for evaluating property, educating the public, which is when he knocks on their door, and of course, enforcing the codes. So this can be in the form of answering questions, issuing warnings, or giving actual citations for code violations. Even though a part of the job does result in violations, code enforcement officers' main objective is to ensure the attractive, lawful, safe community. Code enforcement officer who works for local or county government departments enforce their jurisdiction's established code requirements, ordinances, zoning laws, as well as some adopted state codes, which usually fall under like illicit discharge or soil erosion, that type of.
Stormwater.
Yeah, because the state doesn't give local jurisdictions much authority as far as code enforcement to enforce their codes. They want to keep them in-house. So we frequently receive complaints from citizens, other departments, outside agencies. We have EPD call us and say, hey, we received a complaint on such and such piece of property. Code enforcement will confirm if there's a violation or not. Then we work with the property owner to ensure they comply with the local regulations. Voluntary compliance is always the main goal. So when we issue you a notice of violation, we give you a time frame for compliance. If you're trying to comply, if you're doing work and you just need some extended time, we'll give you that extended time because we want voluntary compliance. If you are not trying, then we will write you a citation and go to court. Then you'll be given.
Have you written any citations, your department written any citations this year?
How many citations you written, Josh?
I think right now, including business license, I've read 28, 29, and I've still got.
Since January 1st? That's court citations, that's not notices of violation. How many notices have you written?
254.
Since January 1st. So the primary goal is voluntary compliance. Violators are afforded time to comply. Citation in court used as the last resort. And violators can be fined up to $1,000 a day, depending on the violation. If it's soil erosion, like for endangering state waters, they can be fined up to $2,500 a day under state law. So just go make them clean it up. She's shaking her head. So just go make them clean it up. So in Camera v. City and County of San Francisco, the Supreme Court held that if an occupant, and it need not be the owner of a resident structure, does not consent to an inspection, a warrant must be obtained in order to legally gain entry onto the premises, and the occupant who does not consent to an inspection cannot be prosecuted for violating a law requiring obedience to the orders of the municipal officers, which means if I walk onto your property and you tell me to leave, I have to leave. In order for me to come onto your property, I have to go get an administrative warrant from the judge. And you cannot be prosecuted for telling me to leave your property. So a code can never authorize an unconstitutional inspection. And the code provisions do not allow for the code officer to inspect someone's property in a matter that contravenes mandates of the Constitution. Whoa, easy there, shotgun. So the plain view doctrine. Plain view doctrine is an exception to the Fourth Amendment's warrant requirements. While consent is required to inspect a building or property, this doctrine holds that the code officer observes a violation while at a location where he or she is legally entitled to be, no violation of the Fourth Amendment results. In other words, if an alleged violation is observable from a place any member of the public may be, The privacy interest of the owner must be considered insubstantial, therefore no warrant is required. So if I can see your tall grass from the street, I don't need a warrant to, no, we can't climb up a tree and look over
I
it.
said public street.
Oh, yeah.
Not a private street, a public street.
Public street. Sidewalk, if we can see it from the sidewalk, it's a violation, we can write it. No, ma'am. No, ma'am. We cannot look over fences.
You can't take pictures of your neighbor's backyard and send it to us, which we get a lot
No.
of.
So if you have a 6-foot privacy fence around your backyard, you have an expectation of privacy. We cannot look over that fence. We cannot take our phones and hold over that fence. We cannot fly a drone over your house. That's an invasion of your Fourth Amendment right, and we can get sued for that. And with the unknown, I know I've said to the council members before, you don't know what's on the other side of that door when you go up and knock on it. You don't know what that person had for breakfast. You know, they could have had Fruit Loops, they could have had meth. You don't know. So these are some of the violations that we've done. And they were actually people living in these houses.
Sit on the street.
Do what?
Sit on the street from my house.
No. This is.
Really? Yes.
You could smell it. You could smell it from the road. Yeah. Yeah. So there was actually 2 people living in this house.
This falls under health and safety, so that's a little bit different than trash in your yard.
Yeah. But this is the kind of thing you can walk into when you go knock on somebody's door. And we do deal with these. And like I said, there was 2 people, a man and his son, lived in this house. Actually, it was a trailer, and that trailer's in a roll-off down the landfill somewhere. Caddo Street. This is not inside the city limits. It is not even in the state of Georgia. But it has some code violations. They need to cut their grass. They got a little cornice that's rotten, needs to be fixed. Look like one of their railings is about to fall off. And keep that in your mind. So the risk of working in code enforcement. 2005, Michael Walker was taking pictures for a city code violation outside of Caddo Street, home in Commerce, Texas, when he was confronted by the homeowner's son. Adam Wade is accused of going into the house, getting his pistol, and shooting Walker multiple times. And Mr. Walker died of his injuries. Rodney Morales, 40. He was doing a routine zoning complaint. This was in 2008. The shooter confronted the officer as soon as he walked into the apartment building and shot him in the chest. Julie Robinson is 52 years old. She had been dealing with this complainant for a while. He was what we call a frequent flyer. I mean, people that don't cut their grass until you tell them to cut their grass, you know? And that happens year after year. So he called up the office, said he wanted her to come by his house so he could talk about fixing a zoning violation. When she got out of the car, he shot her and killed her. He poured gas on her, set her on fire. Then he set her vehicle on fire. She was 52 years old, happened in 2018. Chip Case. I know Chip Case. I knew Chip Case. He had put up a condemned sign on a man's house. The man ambushed him, shot him to death. He's married, had 3 kids. That happened August 20th, 2020, a few months ago. These are other people that's been killed or shot doing code enforcement. So you never know what's on the other side of that door when you knock on that door. And I know there was some scuttle going around on the Facebook page a while back about my code officer carrying a gun. My code officer does not carry a gun. We did get him a bulletproof vest, and we give him training that when he knocks on that door, he steps back and he's got 2 exits. Because
He
you
has a
don't know,
radio in his feet.
you don't know what's on the other side of that door. Fourth one down, Bo Weathers. Bo's a good friend of mine. He worked in Warner Robins. They had got a court order to remove some junk cars out of a man's yard. They pulled up there 2 tow trucks. Man says, I don't want you to tow my cars. Let me go in and get the keys. He come out with a shotgun, shot Bo twice, once in the face, once in the shoulder. Bo had to have 6 reconstructive surgeries from them 2 gunshot wounds. 2 years after that, he quit code enforcement. His PTSD was so bad, he said, I can't knock on doors anymore. I just can't do it. So we try to be as safe as we can. Things happen. So when you say, just go make them do it, always remember, you don't know what's on the other side of that door. We do it in the time as fast as we can, adhering to the law and being as safe as we can. So it might take a little longer than you want to get it done, but we're working the process to get it done.
And it's already happened in Loganville. And don't think it's just in the trailer park or mobile home park. It's in predominant neighborhoods in Loganville. He's already been threatened multiple times and has went to court. So we tell him, there's nothing in the city worth getting killed over. Leave. Just leave. And then we'll let the courts handle it. But,
But you never know what's on the other side of that door. You knock on their door, they look out the window, they see a city truck, they open the door, shoot you. Which could happen to anybody.
So upset.
But his job is basically to go knock on people's doors. That's his job.
Imagine how big upset you was if we came to you and told you to do something with your house and how offended you'd be.
Fun time.
These people are no different than...
Did I hit my timeline?
Yeah, you're good. Yes. So, y'all need to take a break before we get in questions? Linda says yes. If you need to take a break, the restrooms are right down the hall on the left. Water, snacks back there. If not, we'll keep on moving. So if you have questions, you can come up to the mic so the YouTubers can hear us and then ask your question. We'll try to answer it the best that we can. So I hope y'all have a lot of questions.
Can I grab my water? I'll do.
So
That'd be kind of weird.
yeah. Code enforcement is really difficult because a lot of people see trash and they think that's something we can enforce. Well, what may be trash to us may be their treasures. So there's things we cannot legally do. A lot of times pictures will come in, Josh will go out there, and the vehicle's not on the grass. It's just like a police officer. He's not going to catch all the speeders. There's only 5 of them. So,
And some of the calls we get, my neighbor's got 5
I was
bicycles
going to let
in his
everybody
yard.
come back for the questions. So,
Okay.
But you can stand up. You can get ready. You're on deck.
I said, we've got calls where people say, my neighbor's got 5 bicycles in their front yard.
That's all.
Okay. Yeah, they're bicycles. Yard art. Oh, Lord. Yes, yard art.
Yes.
Yes.
So just
Toilet
remember,
with a flower pot?
we are not the HOA of Loganville. So,
We don't care if your house is purple or pink.
we'll wait. What's that? We'll wait for questions when everybody gets back. Yeah, Melanie, she's already jumped up. You gotta wait. Who left? Linda?
Said to stand in line to ask questions.
Who left? Linda? Is Linda the only one that left?
Yeah, she's out.
Okay. Melanie, go ahead. She's a councilwoman. She should know this. Right? Lisa said that, not me.
Is this on?
Yes.
All right, Tim. So when somebody wants to come and do a rezone, when they come to you, do you weed people out before they see, or do we hear every single rezone that comes up? Or have you already weeded them out, and then what's your criteria on that?
If they're eligible, then yes, it comes to the planning commission and the city council. If they're not eligible, then yeah, it stops at me. So if somebody was to come in my office tomorrow and say, hey, I want to rezone this 17 acres to RM8, no, can't do it. It's inactive. So, same way with annexations. If they bring me an annexation, I have to make sure it meets all the criteria to be annexed in. If it does, we move forward. If it don't, if you're going to create an island or if your property doesn't touch city property, then you're not eligible, and that's where it stops. Did I answer your question?
But you have to be annexed before you can be rezoned. So if annex gets denied, everything else got denied. And that's happened a couple of months ago. Next, who's ready? We got 40 minutes. She ain't bashful.
Okay, so you were talking about these plans a while ago and how they go to 6 departments. This is a question, I'm not a.
No.
The retention pond that welcomes everybody to Loganville now. Is there not a standard, like, is there just like, well, that's where the retention pond has to go, so now it's front and center on 78? Or do we not talk with the developer and say, look, you know, really would be unattractive here, could you do some underground retention? Is there not any kind of?
We can't make them do underground retention. Sometimes they choose to do it. But most of the time, it's the lowest area of the property.
Oh, I get why it's there.
Because it all is gravity fed, you know, into the detention pond. So if they put it at the back of the property up on the hill, it wouldn't work.
Oh, no, I get that. I'm just saying, was there not some better alternatives that you could have encouraged the developer to go, look, that's really not going to be really attractive right here on 78 in the middle of our business district.
Right. And, you know, unfortunately, our development regs say they have to plant some trees. You know, it doesn't say if your detention pond's going to be by the road, it has to be underground detention, or, you know, we require them to put up a fence, but we only specify it has to be 6 foot high. It doesn't specify it has to be wooden or, you know, black vinyl chain link, or it just says, you know, it has to be this high.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you.
Everybody's got to come to the microphone for the YouTubers.
I got a hurt leg, I was sitting here.
I got a hurt leg too. I've been standing up here for
I got a hurt leg. I'm standing. No, I'm not. Not yet. I've stopped. Ran out.
I have 2 questions. Is there a noise ordinance in the city limits of Loganville?
Yes, it goes from 10 o'clock at night till 7 o'clock in the morning.
Even the weekends?
Yes,
Except for Main Street District.
that's 11 to 7.
Yep. So the Main Street District is a little bit later.
Okay. And my other question, if you have a property and it's an older property and there is a building existing already, and the back of that building is on the property line, is it grandfathered in? Can
Yes.
that be fixed at the size it is? It just can't be added to?
Right,
Or
it'll be grandfathered in. Now, if the building ever gets torn down, then you would have to adhere to the code with the setbacks. But what is existing is existing.
so if there is rotten wood, you can actually just build in that foundation.
You can replace rotten wood just like you can on your house. But if it gets torn down, then you would have to adhere to the code to build it back.
If the whole structure gets removed, then it has to be up to code.
And you can't add to it. It has to stay the same size as the original size, or not?
You'd have to adhere to the code, which is going to depend on your lot size. Anything under an acre, you can only have 432 square feet as an accessory structure. Can't be over 15 feet high. So if you have more than an acre, then there's no limit on the size building you can have.
Okay. Can it be metal, or does it have to be?
Yes, it can be metal. Yeah. And it has to be 10 foot off your property lines.
But it's
that's what's
grandfathered
in the
in
code.
if it's, you can, okay, so you can't redo a wooden
If it-
building with metal?
Yes,
And
you
so-
can, but if the building was to be torn down, then you would have to adhere to the code to build it back, which means it couldn't be over 432 square feet if you have less than an acre. Can't be over 15 feet high, and it has to be 10 foot off the property lines.
Okay.
But as long as it's there, you can replace any rotten wood, or, you know, however you're going to do it. But if it's ever torn down, you have to adhere to the code.
Can you put concrete on the floor within the?
Yeah.
Okay, did I understand earlier that you said that can we find
are our city codes at the municode.com?
Yes.
So we could search that to say if we see something that, like, that doesn't, instead of calling you to complain and say, hey, this is a problem, can we go find it and see if it is actually in?
Yes, all the
codes?
city's codes are on Municode. Once you go to municode.com, you would go to the library, and you'd go to Georgia. I mean, you have to navigate to Loganville,
The only exception to that is if they change it, say, next council, it'll take some time for Municode to update. So, some of the things I want to say, because I hear, take the 3 buildings being built where the retention pond is across from Chick-fil-A. Oh my God, y'all let another chicken restaurant. We cannot tell you that you can't build a restaurant. If it meets that zoning, which that was already zoned commercial, it never came before the city council. We cannot regulate type of restaurant or a business. Now, there are some businesses that we do regulate. Used cars. It's a specific business. But in a restaurant, they may sell chicken, they may sell hamburgers, they may sell hot dogs, french fries. So you couldn't regulate chicken because it would affect everybody. McDonald's, they sell chicken. Chick-fil-A. So we don't regulate businesses. If they want to build another chicken right next to it, it's up to the owner of the property.
And once we get to churches, we'll have a complete set.
Yes.
We'll have all the chicken restaurants. But apparently, people in Loganville eat chicken. Because if they didn't, had this conversation earlier, every chicken restaurant to drive through is crazy. So, yeah, chicken and biscuits.
Go ahead.
Got a question, and I've done it several times. I send you pictures of, I think, a code violation on some properties. Am I in a violation of the law by taking pictures? I'm taking the pictures from the public street and sending them to either Ray or you, Danny.
No, I mean, you can take pictures. It's just maybe unenforceable.
We couldn't use your picture
To enforce.
to enforce the code. So
Kinda
if you send us the picture with the address, then code enforcement would go out there. If there's a violation, he'll write it.
So think of it as you see somebody speed and you take a picture of it and send it to the police, they cannot write a ticket. Same thing with him. So real quick on code enforcement. Josh is like a police officer. We cannot tell him to write citations. It's up to his discretion. Just like I cannot tell a police officer to go write a ticket. It's up to their discretion to give warning, citation or not. It's up to him. And just because you see it doesn't mean he sees it when he gets there. Because he's only one. And he stays gone he gets here at 8 and leaves by 8:40-ish. Comes back at noon, does his paperwork, and goes back out. So.
One other question. I was asked this today. Is there a restriction as far as when commercial business or commercial vehicles can come into a subdivision?
Yes, there is.
Like the garbage truck, or the sanitation vehicle?
Well, they're not supposed to run before 7 a.m. because that's our nose ordinance.
Is that a restriction for any commercial vehicle coming in?
Well, it's not a restriction on time for the commercial.
But
For a commercial vehicle. Our noise ordinance is from 10 at night till 7 o'clock in the morning. So they're not supposed to be running
making
through your
noise
subdivisions before 7 o'clock.
Just driving.
But
like-
now, as far as commercial vehicles in your subdivision, then like transfer trucks, they can only be there if they're loading, unloading, or doing business. They can't park overnight in your subdivision on your street.
They can't come in earlier than 7 o'clock and say, like unload shingles and for re-roofing of that.
Correct.
And we even get complaints about school buses. They want us to stop that. Swear to you.
Yeah.
However, we
out.
can't regulate school
No,
buses.
because they have to get the children to school.
And that's a government entity, and they don't have to abide by our codes.
Well, I was just checking because I told them I thought it was 7 o'clock.
Yes, it is.
Anything after 7 permissible. Okay, thanks.
Skip, you should know all this.
A little bit. Just to show you there's always a silver lining in a cloud, though. How many complaints have you had about chickens running around people's yards lately?
2.
None, huh?
Actually, if you.
No, I got one.
There are a couple, but
Not only chickens, I mean, we get goats and sheep
there was one pig.
and a pig.
Oh, yeah.
So we don't regulate animals. That's Walton County Animal Control or Gwinnett County Animal Control, depending on where you live. We do not regulate that. That's up to them.
I just wanted to point out Tricia Ellitt's here tonight too, also with the Loganville Development Authority. Appreciate her efforts in that effort. A couple things, when you're in this stuff, and I did it for a while, it's crazy what can happen. I had a neighbor call me and she wanted me to go to the city and shut down all the construction in our neighborhood during the daytime. And I said, well, why would you want to do that? Well, I work at night and I'm sleeping in the daytime. And I said, well, I understand, but that's not going to happen. She said, I'll see about that. So then she comes to the city, and somebody at the city had to talk to that same lady and give her the same information, but it's just uncanny what can happen. When I was working with Tim on this stuff, the things that I found a little bit frustrating, honestly, when people come and ask for variances, or they ask to build something that didn't quite fit and we had to adjust things. I'm thinking of the little warehouse light industrial that they was looking at over there where the putt-putt's gonna be going. A lot of people spend a lot of time. I mean, a lot of people spend a lot of time. They came here with their attorney after they'd been to the commission, and then they presented it to the council, and we had a room full of neighbors right there, that little subdivision next door, that didn't want it to be there. So, if you remember, Tim, we tabled that one that night, and we told the developer, you either got to get with these homeowners and come up with a plan, or we're not going to be able to go forward. Well, to their credit, they did. He had an attorney, and they had meetings and all kinds of stuff. And they came back, and the homeowners came to us and said, we're okay with it. We can live with it if he'll do those things that's got listed. And then if the developer or the lawyer says, I assure you, if you approve it, we'll agree to all the things that they want us to do. Well, no. We're going to agree when we write up what's required of that property before we're going to agree to let you do the thing. Because sometimes they don't follow up on what they're supposed to do either. So then everything's set, everybody's happy. Never happens. 3 years ago, it's never happened. Now somebody else has bought the property and they move them. It's just things you go through. I mean, it's just life. But it's amazing how many times that does happen. And it's interesting, it's frustrating, and it's amazing how much time different people put into these things. Also, we didn't mention, Tim.
That was in 2012, Skip.
Yeah, I know. 2012 was definitely right. It's just really amazing the things that can happen, and nobody knows it except the folks that are living in it, obviously. And then people come in and say, well, why can't you do this? Well, there are reasons. Can you see from this presentation why many developers have attorneys when they come in to pitch their whatever they want to do? Because many developers don't know our regulations versus somebody else. They just don't. It's really interesting. Isn't it, Lisa?
It is very interesting.
And frustrating.
And let me say this too, I just can't, I want to brag on the job out here. I did a ride along on there. Microphone. I was saying I did a ride along with Josh one day, code enforcement. I learned a lot, and I came back and I told Danny, I don't know who hired this guy, but they need to be commended. And we need to find a way to clone him. We need Josh on this side of the city and Josh too on that side of the city. This is a fantastic guy that does a great job for us.
Yeah.
And with Lisa with you, how many times did you get shot at that day?
None.
With Lisa with you? No? You must have been in disguise.
All right, go ahead.
Yes, sir.
Are you expecting?
You never know what's on the other side of the door.
The other thing, and I'm almost through, and you'll be ready, Tricia. The other thing is, you need to keep in mind in our city, anybody that's on the Loganville Development Authority or anybody that's on the Planning and Zoning Commission, or anybody that's on the council lives in your city. I mean, it's not like we're saying, do what the heck you want to do and let those people suffer, because we're all going to suffer. But there's some things you just can't fix. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Well, I appreciate what you just said. I was going to say, thank you. I appreciate you. And can we hire another one? And maybe get a chest camera for him?
He has one.
Okay. Hazardous materials, maybe, something that can protect him. I know he's been to my neighbors, and this quote that I'm about to share did not come from you. This house is horrendous. Yes, there's been a toilet out front. It was removed. I've seen them out there casting fishing lines in the street more than once, because they have boats, more than one, in their yards, you name it, they have it. And whatever dumpster you guys suggested, that's become a part of the plan now. Yes.
They also have a citation to go talk to the judge and tell the judge why they don't want to get rid of their stuff.
So,
Yeah.
it's been a few years ago, and it wasn't Josh, but I had called a few times, and honestly,
They are
so frustrated.
one of our frequent flyers. Yes, they are.
Yes, and the code enforcement guy was so frustrated. He said, there is no code against ugly. And
Right.
that's a quote. I mean, you can't make that up. It wasn't Josh.
Yeah.
So my question is, if you can't nitpick the various violations, can't there be something? I believe they're running a junkyard business out of this house, and you can't run a business. Is there any way to?
So once we give them a notice of violation and they don't comply or don't even try to comply, actually, I think Josh said last time he went out there, there was more stuff there than there was the first time he went and gave them a notice of violation. So once we issue them a court citation, that's all we can do.
Legally.
We have to wait for them to see the judge.
30 days.
5 months right now.
It depends on, the court, because the court tells us what dates to write on the citations, and it depends on how many cases they have coming in. So once we write that citation, we're on hold till court. Once they go to court, one of three things will happen. The judge will dismiss it because they corrected the violation. The judge will fine them, or the judge will give them a order to clean it up with a time frame, just like we did. The only difference is if they don't have it cleaned up within that time frame that the judge gave them, then they're in violation of a court order, and that's a criminal offense. We don't do criminal, we only do civil. So once we write the citation, it's in the court's hands.
And so once they've been issued and probably already been to court, and this thing just keeps exponentially developing, does the fine increase with the development?
That is totally up to the judge. Usually the day before court, Josh will ride by there and take pictures so he can say, this is what it looked like yesterday, and the judge makes their determination based on that. But it's totally at the judge's discretion of what the fine is. Yeah, and it can't be over $1,000.
That's the max the judge can find.
And citizens go and talk about what it's doing to their neighborhood to the judge.
Violation of property, reducing property values, or
I don't know. I would have to ask the judge on that question.
when the city steps in to clean it up, isn't there some sort of lien that you can go to that can do that to their taxes?
Yeah. So the question is there some type of lien we can do?
Is this on YouTube and they can't hear you if you're not talking into it, Mike?
Yes, there is a blight ordinance, but the blight ordinance cannot be used for unsightly property. It's for health and safety. They're living in there with no power, no electricity, and it's in some type of, there are 6 categories it meets, but it'll tell you in the Muni Code that it cannot be used for property that's not sightly. So yeah, we could put a lien for the cost to fix it, but then we have to try and give them a tax break 4 years up to the cost of the lien, and then we reduce our taxes. So we would get, on one property we looked at, it was like $90 we would collect. But then we reduce our taxes for 4 years by half. So
Yeah.
we'd actually lose money. I don't know why we did the ordinance. It was before me, but
But that ordinance was done under the guidelines of state law. That's what state law says you can do.
Is there any consideration for the elderly that's in there? Because she's quite elderly. Is there anything as far as health for her?
I believe she's the one that got the citation, wasn't it, Josh?
Yes.
Because she's the property owner.
Well, yeah, and then we'd have to get a warrant to go look at the property. So I think it's a whole nother issue.
Like 20 years ago, it used to be really nice.
But I don't know if the judge would allow, I'll ask that question, because I really don't know. I don't know if the judge would allow people to come in his courtroom and,
It is open to the public, but I don't know if he would allow to speak.
yeah.
It's not like a public hearing.
I'll
where you have
find
a
out and
chance
let
to
you know.
speak, But yeah, well, look.
And also, if there's anything that could be done or ascertained, they're running a junkyard business out of the house. They attach a trailer to the white truck, I know you know what I'm talking about, and they haul off whatever they have acquired from wherever, doing whatever, whenever. So it's a business that they've got going on. I don't know if that's an angle.
Is the HOA, is our HOA?
We don't have an HOA.
No.
Thank you. Maybe that's an angle.
So moratorium, I'll talk about moratorium because I've heard that before. Why don't the city do a moratorium? So a moratorium can be used, but it has to be defined why you're using it. You just cannot put a moratorium just because you want to. Sewer capacity is a reason we've done that for sewer capacity. When our plant was at a certain percentage, we either had to stop growing or start expanding. And we're in expanding. So we are finished with our phase 2 of expanding our plant for development. It was done in 2018, a 2-year project, and they should be wrapping up this month. It took us from 1.6 million gallons a day of sewer treating to 3.3 million gallons a day. So that was intent for the city growing. It's one of the things I tell them. I know a lot of people say, well, my God, you just want the property taxes. Property taxes, they come with property. But more importantly, it pays for that plant because of the tap fees. Water rates. I know when Lisa ran for council and Ann, they were like, we need to look at reducing water rates. And I was like, well, yeah, but we can't. Well, yeah, we can. I said, well, you can. But the bond that gave us the money for the plant says if you reduce these rates, we can call the bond due. If you don't know what that means, it's like they call your mortgage due. You have to either pay your mortgage or move. Same thing with the plant. At the time, it was a $12 million bond. We only owed $4 or $5 million at the time. But the current bond we're in now is $19 million. So they look at our rates and our what's called tap fees. So every time a developer taps onto our sewer system or our homeowner, they have to pay a set fee. It's based on the size of the line that you use. Those cannot be waived. That's the one thing that I, as a city manager, nor the city council can waive. They're set by the bond. And that bond document is about 700 pages. So that's where, when they do deny development, I tell them, well, just remember, we got a bond payment we have to pay every year. It's $1 million right now. In 10 years, it goes up to almost $2 million to pay off a $19 million bond. But, we have to do that to prepare for the future because it takes many, many years to get a plant up and running. So just know that. There's a whole lot more to it than just growth and people saying there's more traffic. Schools, we don't deny them based on schools. They're a different entity. They have to prepare for growth just like the city of Loganville has to prepare for growth. So that cannot be used as a sole factor to deny the rezone. No information that you don't know, when the attorneys submit a rezoning case, they submit you a lawsuit in preparation. They reserve their constitutional right to say, if you deny me, I'm giving you notice that we're going to sue you. Last week, Ms. Webb says, let me see if that's in there. And it was in there. So if we were to deny them, they're telling us right now. That's why some people say, well, how do you know they're going to sue? Because they give us the letter of intent. That's why you see attorneys present cases. They have to be spelled out step by step. It's called the ZPL, the Zoning Procedures Law. Tim has to be advertised a certain way. It has to show the time. I have to have 2 public hearings. A lot of times when we, the council will say, "My God, Danny, why are we having a work session on 4th of July?" Well, because it was advertised months and prior.
2 months ago.
2 months ago that we had to have 2 public hearings by law. If we deviate from that, now they just won their case because we didn't follow the ZPL. It's the only thing in our department or in the city that's step by step by step by step that you will do. So that's why Tim has such a hard job of making sure, you know, he follow the rules. So I'll ask him, I'm like, "Tim, please tell me you did everything right." "Yep, I got it checked off right here." But we made mistakes. We've made mistakes before, but we've learned from those mistakes. Got to remember, there's one person doing that. We don't have a legal team behind him. We have an attorney that we call regularly about zoning. She gets more zoning than anything. So I hope this helps y'all understand.
I've been on the phone with her at 8 o'clock on a Saturday night before. So, yeah. A zoning question.
And guess what? We as a council, they cannot talk about this unless it's in a public setting. They can't meet on the side and discuss this. If there's 4 of them, that's a council meeting. That's why this meeting was advertised, because I figured some more would come. And guess what? We got 3 and the mayor was here. That's not a council meeting, but if one person would have showed up, it became a city council meeting because we're discussing city business. So that's why
that falls under what in the state law? Is anybody paying attention? Title 36, Chapter 36, OCGA.
So,
come on, Patty. Gotta be on it.
Age is just a number. That's what I tell Danny all the time. All right, what other questions you got? We got like 10 more minutes.
Planning and zoning board, what do they do and how long are their terms?
4 years are their terms. 4 is an alternate year, so we just were approved in 2020 for 4 years, and the next one goes out in 2022.
Yeah.
Their role is to go out, look at stuff, and make a recommendation to the council. If they make a mistake, the city council can fix it. They're citizens. They don't have an attorney like we do. Sometimes they do make mistakes. And then the city council, I'll have to go to them and say, "Look, they didn't do this right, so y'all are going to have to hear this case. This happened." If we didn't do that, then we would have got sued. So those are some of the things that Tim and I have to constantly stay on top of, because it's just a mistake. You know, there's no way that people that don't do this for a living knows all this stuff. And guess what? This profession is the only profession that everybody's an expert at. Just go look at the websites. Go look at Facebook. They're all, "Well, if I was this, I would do this and this." Well, my job's the only job that everybody's an expert. But that answers your question? Yes.
Is there also jail time that goes with that $1,000 fine?
That's based to the judge. I don't believe he can. I believe he can set it a fine, but you know.
Well, I know it's Gwinnett County.
Yeah, it's solely up to the judge. So, yes, Ron.
If we, I know I contacted the city about stolen property.
Oh.
And sometimes I really don't see us doing any, I don't know whether if it meets code or doesn't meet code or what, but, you know, is there a feedback that, hey, the code enforcement's looked at it, there's nothing they can do, or do I have to assume that it meets code and just forget about it?
Sometimes there are. It just depends on, you know, if you call us and tell us a violation and say, "Hey, do you mind calling me back and giving me updates?" A lot of them we get are anonymous. We have a app on our city website. It's called C-Click Fix, and we get anonymous complaints on it. You know, we try to keep up with it and respond to them that, you know, if we're looking into it, we've issued them a violation, or the case is closed, there was no violation. So it's a case-by-case basis. You know, if you call code enforcement and you say, hey, can you keep me updated on this? He'll keep you updated on it. But if you just say, hey, there's a code violation, go check it out, then, you know, checks it out.
I guess my next question is, do I need to send those to you, or do I need to send them to Dan?
You can keep bothering Danny. It don't matter.
He said that.
I usually start out with Ray, and then I usually
Work your way down? Yeah.
It's TPRATER at Loganville-GA.gov. But if you do see-click fix, it automatically sends it to the respective department.
Yes.
So if you anonymously put something on the website saying that such and such or whatever, then is the, when it's, when the person complies, is that on the website too, that?
Yes, he'll
There's a
go in
status.
and close out the case,
There's a
or,
status,
yeah. And you can actually go back in there under that complaint and ask for a update if you hadn't, you know, if he hadn't responded to
Right.
it. So,
But
yeah,
it'll
it'll,
just say open or close. It won't say that he's went to court or anything like that.
yeah.
Or they complied and so it's
Right.
closed, or they
It'll just say
didn't.
open or closed.
So, but you know if it's closed, they complied or not, or,
Or the
Or the
violation,
receipt.
you didn't see the violation.
okay.
Yeah, or if it's been a while, you know, and you just want to update, you can go back into see-click fix and go under that violation, because you can see all the violations. And you go under that violation and, you know, you can say, hey, what's the status on this? And he'll respond to it and tell you what the status is. As soon as you hit submit on see-click fix, he gets it.
So do you actually put the address in on that?
Yes, I mean, we got to have the information of,
Right, but that, if you went back to check on it, you would go back to that address.
Yes,
And see what
mhm.
happened.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so there's see-click fix there. It shows us see-click fix. It's on the, it's on the website, on the City of Loganville's website, correct, Kyle?
And you see, if you go to the website and click
Like SEE, like C, click fix.
Okay.
I believe there's an app too for it.
If you go to the city website, at the top, you click contact.
Okay, okay.
When you click contact, it's on contact page.
Now, I'll say this, if it's something, hey, the streets are being blocked, don't send it to see-click fix. I have a water main break, I have a sewer spill, don't put it on see-click fix. You call 911 if it's an emergency, all right? There's water shooting out of the ground on Highway 78, you call 911, they will find us.
and if you send that to code enforcement and it's 10 o'clock at night, he's not going to see it till 8 o'clock in the morning. So if you have an emergency, call somebody.
Do you do that for noise ordinances? You see click fix?
Yeah, you can
Now-
do see-click fix or, well, we're not gonna be able to do nothing because we're gonna get it hours later, but call the police.
Yes, so the police department is the ones that's gonna handle the noise ordinance, because it's from, you know, 10 o'clock at night till 7 o'clock in the morning. So,
The
yeah,
police can enforce state laws and all city ordinances. Josh can only enforce city ordinances. So,
and a few
but-
state codes.
a few stickers.
Yeah.
But for most likely, if it's something that Josh needs to handle grass, they're gonna call Josh the next morning and say, hey, Josh, we got this complaint, you need to go look at it.
Yeah. If it's cars parked in the street, that's gonna fall under the police department, not code enforcement, because that's a traffic violation. And he can't do traffic law.
I just want to make a comment about the comment about,
Comment about the comment?
yeah, comment about the comment, about having more code enforcement people. Well, if you looked at the budget and went over the budget, you know the money's not there. And no one wants taxes raised. But if the city wants more enforcement, they want more law, they want more firemen, the only way we're going to do that is by raising taxes. So you can't have your cake and eat it too. You've got to decide which one's more important. And if you really listen to how much our taxes would go up, maybe per month, and I know when we raised the taxes last time, oh my goodness, you thought we had blown up the city. But it only goes up maybe $10, $15 is all. It goes up. And to people that are retired and on set fixed income, that is a problem.
I'm
And
on
they are
fixed
the ones
income.
that pitch the fit.
I know how much money I'm gonna
My
make
check
every
never
month.
changed, I'm gonna fix income too.
But, you know, you can't expect us as city elected officials to meet all your needs if you never want to raise taxes. And when we deny people building because of traffic or other things that we
Not
can't.
because of traffic.
We can't do it because of traffic, but if we deny it because we get so many complaints, we don't want this, we don't want this. And we deny that. Every time we deny somebody building houses or building a subdivision, then that cuts into our revenue that we want to collect. So you can't have it both ways. You've got to decide which one you want.
Well, they're going up this year, so will that go?
We're not going up this year.
No, pay what they on the house.
Oh.
My taxes are, I pay the taxes, that's all I'm saying.
No, you're not. Let me tell you why. Let me tell you why, Patty. Because we do a thing called rollback. So state law says if last year our revenue for taxes was $5,800,000, I collected $5,822,000. If I go over 3% of that number, that's considered a tax increase. So what the city council does is they roll that millage rate back to keep the revenue for taxes, even though I know my property in Walton County went up a lot because assessments went up. So the city will roll back that millage rate to keep that property tax revenue the same. So right now, the budget that I'm preparing to submit next month is at $5.9 million for property tax. I want $100,000. Now, I have no idea what the digest is going to look like until after we adopt the budget, which is in June, but the digest doesn't come till July, August, because we got to get them from both counties. That number goes in, it spits out a number, it says, this is what your number is going to be. If you do the rollback, this is what it's going to be. So that's what a rollback rate is. I wish they wouldn't adopt the rollback rate, because then I would produce more revenue, but I would not be technically raising your taxes, because our millage rate in the city right now is set at 12.38, 12.5. But your rollback rate that you're in right now is 11.85. That's called the rollback rate. So we reduced the millage rate to keep the property taxes from going up.
So I won't be paying more this year.
Your assessments will go up, yes. You'll pay more if they don't adopt the rollback rate. But it's not because we raise the taxes, it's because your value in your house went up.
I think people in general though, Danny, if it goes up.
They think it's a tax increase, but it's not.
I don't care why, when, where, how. It's just going up.
Right, but just remember, the city of Loganville does not set valuation of your property. The county does.
It's still going up.
Right, so, but we reduce our rollback rate so it doesn't go up. It may go up a few dollars because we can go up to 3% and we try to get that extra revenue to do things like y'all want, but.
So the increase we're seeing is on the county level?
It's on your assessments going up. So
Yes.
if assessments go up, say 20%, just hypothetically, I know they're not.
Y'all, there are 50 people watching online.
Oh, yeah. So,
Pleasantly asked.
where's the microphone? You'll pass it. So,
Danny's hoarding it.
so
Danny's
your
hoarding
millage
it.
rate may be reduced if assessments go up higher, if they adopt the rollback rate, but that's only council.
Okay.
Could we talk about the traffic on 20 over here where the new subdivisions are going in? Is Loganville gonna widen the road? I mean, are we gonna have a turn lane then? I'm looking at it today, seeing where the curbs are.
Over on 20?
Or is there gonna be?
That's a state right away. I mean, state route, we don't decide if it gets widened or not. That's
So
GDOT.
between the two subdivisions on Lawrenceville Road,
Yeah.
is that what you're talking about? The developers are gonna put a turning lane in there. And there's gonna be decel lanes for each subdivision.
Okay.
They're waiting on one subdivision has just got their final plat, so they started getting building permits. They're waiting on the other subdivision to get to that point before they do that improvement in front of the subdivisions. But yes, they are.
There are plans to bring from Brand Road to Highway 784 lanes, but who knows when the state will do that. But that's solely a state of
That's
Georgia.
still, yes, that's a state route.
That's correct.
Okay, and did the state pay for the new traffic signals
Yes.
we got there?
Except for the one at CS Floyd and 81, we contributed, I won't say 300,000 to that. It was a quick response, so no, not 300,000, 100,000. It was a total project of 200,000, but the state only gave 200,000. We chipped in 100,000 for the CS Floyd, which is a city road. So
Correct.
every other red light that was upgraded was on the state's cost.
Well,
It was part of 17 in Walton County.
kudos to the state because it's helped out some. The light out here at 20 and 20 and 20 right here at the
Main Street.
right here. Is the timing off on it?
They're all, so I know we see that a lot on Facebook. They've been out multiple times, and we've sent our engineer out there to calculate it, and all the timings are all the same throughout the entire city. Every red light in the city of Loganville got timed equally at the state. We made recommendations to the state, and they approved it, and they came and fixed them.
Because I know the traffic was backed up, well, from 81 to here at 20, going toward Kroger, that area, toward 78. And I've never seen traffic backed up there until after the new lights went in.
Well, CS Floyd the loop was cut, so it reset the timing, so we had to fix the loops. That's what triggers the timing, the turn signals and the red lights. So it backed up here, but on 78, they were all timed according with GDOT. There's only so much we can do with their lights. We can make recommendations all day long, but they have to approve it. They have to physically come out and reset the lights, but they told us they have done that, yes.
Okay, so I have a question about these little cameras on a pole.
Traffic counters.
They're spying on you.
That's not what I wanted to hear.
Patty can answer this for you because she asked me about it.
So why those instead of the little rubber strips?
There's both.
Right, so why any of these instead of just the rubber strips?
Because on the 4-lane road, 2 lanes on each side, they have to do the rubber strips, and on the single lights, they do the cameras.
Because the camera on a pole was at the end of our subdivision.
Mm-hmm. There's 27 intersections that we deemed to look at on this traffic study, to look at future projects that we could do in the future.
So it's essentially the same. The rubber strip is the same as a camera on a pole.
Except for the camera is more, the guy sits there and counts the cars literally.
So he doesn't get to go to the bathroom. The
I don't know. That's what they're paying for. Yeah.
5-gallon bucket.
No, that's
Get to work.
the company we hired, KCI. That's who does that. That's the engineer firm that we selected to do the study for the ARC grant.
And what's the firm?
KCI.
What's the ARC grant?
Atlanta Region Commission. That's who sets the funding for GDOT. They gave us a grant. It was a 80-20 split, so they pay 80%. We pay 20%. I believe we got $290,000, and we paid 20% of that, which is almost 60, but not quite. So our share of the money comes out of SPOST, which is technically a tax, but it's not your property tax. It's a tax that everybody pays when they go to City of Loganville and buy, or I'm sorry, in Walton County, it is that 1% sales tax, which you should always vote yes on that, because without that.
So you made me talk fast so you could talk more.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it was. So it's after 8:30.
It's after 8:30. I will stay here as long as y'all do, but staff, I know y'all got things to do. I'll stay here and.
Thank y'all very much.
Lisa wants to thank y'all for this.
Thank y'all for coming out, and I challenge anybody, if anybody has questions this guy cannot answer. He knows everything about the city. Thank you,
A
Danny.
little bit of everything, not a whole lot.
He will diligently answer your questions
I will.
immediately. You email him, you get an answer that day.
Thank y'all for coming. It shows you care, and I appreciate that.
That's what we're